Great. So I welcome everybody and our community members. So in this tutorial, we will be understanding about quite a special thing related to pawns. So pawns is considered to be the soul of chess. And here today we'll try to cover a topic which will include related to pawn promotion. So pawn promotion is a move, okay, which helps the pawn to transform into something better, to transform into a bigger piece. So usually, whenever you see a pawn is successfully if it goes to the top square. Okay, imagine that you are in the white team and you know that your pawn starts from the second rank. And from the second rank, the pawn goes to the last square. If successfully your pawn, without getting captured, reaches the last square, you get a pawn promotion. It's a special move. So pawn can transform into something bigger. So the options available for the pawn are okay, pawn can promote. Yeah. Obviously the queen. The value of the queen is 9, or a rook 5, or a bishop 3, and knight is 8. You cannot promote okay, you cannot promote to a king, and you cannot stay apart. So these are the things to remember and understand about pawn promotion. Okay, so it's a good thing, right? A pawn with all of these struggle reaches the last square and becomes a queen. Interesting, very, very interesting. And that is what today we'll try to look at. This basically makes the game more dynamic, more interesting. Yeah, as you can see that right now, if you see, we have only the pawns available. And if you want to win this game, you need somebody to checkmate the king. A pawn can checkmate, but it needs a very subtle, okay, it needs an appropriate position for a pawn to checkmate. And usually connected pawns checkmate the king. But scattered pawns like these is difficult. And that is why this rule of pawn promotion comes handy. So here now, whoever is watching us, I would request to comment your answer and tell us, like, what do you think we should do here? The pawn on g4 has a choice. It can either capture the h pawn, it can either capture the f pawn, or it can either try to go forward, right? So which one is best? So when you're trying to make these type of decisions, it is always better to choose a square which makes you go more far from the opponent team. Right now, we are representing the white team. So our opponent king is the black king. So we need to go as far as we can from this black king. So here, when you think about it, it feels that we should capture the h5 pawn. But let's verify using the rule of square. So now a new word, the rule of square. Okay, it's a very handy trick. Okay, usually used when promoting pawns. Yeah, so what does the rule of square say? So the rule of square says after you complete, okay, or when it's your turn, right? Like for example, when this will happen, this king will try to go close. So now when the pawn is here, if you see, okay, try to create an imaginary box. Try to create an imaginary box, and you can see the king is in the box. So if the king is in the box, means you're like on the edge of the box and inside the box, then automatically the pawn will be chased. Let's see. If you capture this, king goes up, you push. King goes to f7, you push up. See, the king is on G7. The king is in time to stop you. But this distraction just helps us to achieve a very interesting thing. So when the pawn is getting pushed, the black's responsibility is utterly difficult. He has to stop this. He cannot be busy promoting himself. If he does, he will lose the race. Because we just need 1, 2, 3 turns to become a queen, whereas they will need 1, 2, 3, 4 turns. They're always needing 1 extra turn. So we will become a new queen. So which basically means the black king should stop it. Okay. So, okay, let's think again. Pawn h5, king e6, we push, they come, we push, and g7. So why will they maintain this route and not the EFG route? Because via this route, they at least have a support with the f pawn since our king. Okay, since our king that is on d4 is also quite near. It's also quite near to this pawn. Okay, so it is very important for the black king to be close enough for this f pawn, because if the black king is not close, then our king will simply chop this pawn and we will improve our advantage. Because right now, the white king is also in a dilemma that if he immediately starts coming here, he has to first eliminate the b5 pawn, make a space, and then the pawn shall go upstairs and become a queen. Correct. Then the pawn will become a queen. So it will take 1, d5 is the 1 square, b5 capturing 1 square, a6. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 square, then 3 plus 4, 7. So it will take 7 moves for the queen to successfully make it a queen. So we have to do this smartly. So we use our pawn as a distraction, because ultimately we need to make this king, okay, go away, loosen the position, because see, this pawn on b5 is going nowhere. This pawn has no promotion. We just have to first take care of these 2 pawns. And when we have done this, then obviously our king is coming to d5 and we will win the position, right? So let's begin then. So let's capture. Yeah. So let's read what's written here. White creates a more distant pass pawn. It's a very important thing to understand. A distant pass pawn. If she instead took on f5, then black would advance his h pawn. Okay. Diverting the white king. Correct? So what does it mean? If you took the f pawn, then the h pawn would have raised your white king, because now your white king cannot be super happy that, oh, there's a single black pawn. Here, the white king has to also solve the problem of the promotion from the black. Correct? So it's very, very important, because the pawns, as soon as it reaches closer to the edge of the board, its value or its worth keeps on increasing. Okay, and if the queen is on the board first, whichever team gets the queen first, on a general note, automatically the position improves for them and they can win the game. So that is why it's a race. So also that's why it's called pawn race. The pawns are racing to reach the finish line. Whoever finishes the line first, whoever touches the last square first gets queen and has a chances of winning the game. So that's why we create a distant pawn, keeping our king with this pawn in the range, right? Okay, so what will happen is, now the king, as I said, will try to maintain this route because the black king knows that he's reaching. But because the black king knows that he's reaching, we will create distance. Yeah, we will create distance. We push. The king comes forward. We push. We want the king to lose the square f6 and go beyond. Okay, so see how the king goes there. And now we come close to this pawn, because we are not going to waste time in getting the king very much. Simple. The king will capture that pawn. He can't undo that, right? So our king goes up to e5, chops off. Then we capture the f5 pawn, right? Now the king will try to march here. Okay, we come, they come, we come, because we are confident we are reaching first. So we don't have to worry at all. We just have to simply move on. Okay, we capture. This is totally fine. The king is coming, and then we just simply try to unveil. or we take our position, like whatever way you go. Since we have two connected pawns and there are no black pawns left in the position, it is super easy to convert, and white is winning this. Okay, so I hope you understood what is a pawn, a passed pawn, pawn race. Okay, so these were the words that we learned, we viewed. Okay, and we also explored the rule of squares, right? Which is a very handy trick to, you know, just be careful about your calculation. And it also helps to think better in chess. Now, so we are in the white team. So I would request everybody to take a good look at the position. So if you see, we are in the white team again. We are representing the white team. And the king here is on g1, quite far, very much in the castle. As compared to the black king, which is slightly more active than the white king. Now let's count the number of pawns. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here, if you observe, both the team has this equal number of pawns, but if you compare, we just have one small advantage. Our one of the pawns is on h6, slightly more advanced than the black pawns, because black pawns are very much in their own area. But our pawn has somehow managed to go to that area. Now, the question comes, how do we make this pawn push a success? Because the king is going to take a lot of time. And even if he tries to, go inside, because see, the pawns can only be managed if you start attacking the base. You start attacking the base. But here you have to be quick enough to support this, right? To support this. So here, if you observe, like, let's go for a natural plan, right? Let's try to eliminate the base pawn, that is an h7 pawn, which will make the g6 pawn be, and then we clear the path for the pawn. So let's think of the natural order. If we go bishop g8, trying to hit this, what will happen is king will come forward, right? You capture, okay, you capture this. Obviously, they are not happy about this move that the bishop will capture, that they will push it, right? They will push it, or they might bring the bishop from b7 to help this pawn. Then the bishop goes out, king goes to f8. You might push the pawn to defend the bishop, okay, and also threaten promotion. The king comes to g7 and stops everything. So basically, when you're moving the bishop to g8, you're taking 2 extra turns to clear the path for the pawn. Okay, you first go to g8, you eliminate the pawns, then you make way, then the pawn gets a chance to promote. Correct? So it is a waste of time. It's a waste of moving chess. Move. Time. Time is equal to move. And if you are taking extra turns to do a particular thing, so basically wasting time. So here we have to figure out how can we speed up the process of moving ahead, right? So very interesting move here is, I hope everybody must have seen it. Bishop g6. Now you might say, like, how is this great? You're just giving up a 3-point bishop for a 1-point pawn. Now trying to make sense of what's happening here. When we chop off the pawn on g6, what are we telling the opponent? That, hey, I don't care about my bishop at the moment, because if you capture, okay, which basically is the only solution left for the black team, if they did not react, they're just losing the h7 pawn altogether again. So when they capture, then they basically help the pawn to become a queen faster. Now you might say, okay, well, what if the king comes first? King e7. We capture. King f8. We go back. Okay, we go back. We'll sit on f5. Which is thing is good. King now cannot come G7 because the pawn is controlling. So he might come to G8. But now do you see this? When the king is on G8 and when the pawn is on H6 and the bishop is controlling this diagonal, the king will never be able to touch the pawn or come down to attack the pawn. Okay, and they have lost two pawns in the process. Okay, and the king will always be hooked in this particular box. And this is a very huge advantage. They have lost two pawns. They have lost the freedom of their king. And now our king will be super great. Okay, we push the pawn to G4. Okay, we just fixate our position so that it will never be harmed. Okay, and the king just, starts the game and we will just divert ourselves in taking care of these two pawns. Okay, we'll take care of these two pawns. The bishop will just roam around. Okay, we'll try to keep building in the dark squares. The bishop is harmless to us. We'll settle down these two pawns. And the king will always be there. And because the king cannot come on the other side of the board, defend the position, so our king will obviously overpower the bishop. And we have higher chances to push it. So when we settle down the A7, B6, and these two pawns against our A2 pawn, then our king will be very much available to come back to the king side and punish. So if they do not accept, we are still winning. We're winning two pawns, and that is great in endgames. Okay. And they accept, they just help us to promote. Because see the irony of the position. The bishop is a wrong color bishop because the queen square is a dark square. And this bishop is just helpless. So when you sacrifice and when they recapture, so see the bishop's only chance of coming to E4 in time was the way to save it. But it never happened because the square got blocked by its own pawn. And the bishop cannot help in any condition. The king is far away and we win the game. Absolutely marvelous. So sometimes sacrificing a piece for a better good is always recommended. You should do it. You should obviously do it. It's a good thing. Yeah, great. Now, so this is one of the most interesting positions to remember when you're dealing with past tense. So this is a very classic position, very classic puzzle, or you can say thing, which will teach you a lot about pawn formation. Yeah, so here if you see our king is sort of too far from our pawns. And we also observe that the black king is too close. So if we allow the black king to come quicker, so the king would be much happy to capture these pawns. And when the path is clear, then these three pawns will be too powerful for a single king and they will win the game. So here lies the trick. You have to find a move which saves the game. So if anybody is watching us, try to suggest your answers in the comment box. It's a very, very interesting move. Okay? So I'll suggest you the solution. The solution is pawn G6. Okay, so many people must have come up with the solution because you can see the two pawns are backing your leader, the pawn leader right now. Okay, because if a fight happens, you're there to react. But this is not the main thing. The main thing is you use the concept of deflection to win the game. So when you push the pawn, obviously black king will react. Here, the black pawn cannot ignore. The black pawn can't say, I want to capture. They will capture, they have to capture, because if they do not, they are basically about to lose a square. So here, the black king will react. Now they have two choices. And so whenever the opponent has more choices, the more problem always is present. So let's assume they start with the F pawn. Okay, they start with the F pawn. So here, this is the thing that you have to observe. And we will be also looking at what happens if the H pawn captures. So when the F pawn captured this G6 pawn, it clears the F pawn path, which basically means the importance of this pawn is slightly increased. And because the king is far, it is difficult for the king to stop this. Now, if you have to make this pawn a queen, you need to also see that the pawn on g7 will stop you. So this is where you use this super pawn to h6. Now, why this move is great? It looks just like we are sacrificing, but this move is absolutely marvelous. Because when you push the pawn from h5 to h6, you're basically questioning the existence of the g7 pawn. You're asking the pawn a tough question that, hey, if you capture my f5 pawn, I'll capture your g6 pawn and I'll make it move faster. And if you capture my h pawn, I will push because now the control is lost and I am becoming a queen first. That's the trick. Now black is lost on the spot. Okay, they capture the h6 pawn because they have to capture and we just push and we win the game. Now you might say, what happens if the h pawn captures? Now this is the thing to observe. When the h pawn captures the g6 pawn, now the h gets a free open file. So you will use the f pawn to deflect the g pawn. Okay, and when they capture, then you push the h pawn and become a queen on this side. So that's how you have to switch and change and win. See, if you do this, if you play f5 to f6, they will capture and you are lost. You're dead last. Because now this pawn has no scope. So you use this pawn, which has no scope, to become an interesting deflector. You capture, you push, and back, you win this. Yeah. So, great, my friends. Thank you for watching the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and we learned a lot about pawn promotion. So whenever you are dealing with pawns, please be careful because they can change the whole dynamics of the endgame. See ya.